Information Sciences at the University of Louisville. Dean Cardarelli has been very busy since she got here in April, especially this past week with homecoming, and we're getting ready to head to APHA. So we're really grateful you took the time to be here today and to talk with Matt. So it's all you.
Great. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. And I'm so happy to be here today to continue our celebration of Matt Rhodes as our 2024 Alumni Fellow. As Melissa mentioned, we have been very busy in the School of Public Health and Information Sciences, especially this last week. It's been great, though, to see the Cardinal community come together. Just in the last week, we had the official Alumni Awards banquet where we got to honor Matt and all the other fellows. We also had Raise Some L, which we had some record numbers that we will be sharing with you all soon. And despite the loss, the football team showed up big time against Miami. And I had the pleasure of sitting next to Matt during the football game, as well as my son who plays football in high school. So we had a great time. And really, it is one of the best parts of being a public health educator and dean to learn about the professional experiences of our alumni and discover the ways that they are improving health and advancing health equity in their careers. And so I think it's time to invite Matt Rhodes to come up here and join me so that we can learn more about his career.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for being here with us today and for agreeing to this interview format. We thought we would just keep this informal and conversational. And then at the end, we'll make sure that we leave time for your questions. So I didn't read your bio as part of the intro, which is on our website, by the way, if you want to read his full bio, but we hope to cover highlights of his career during our conversation today. So let's get started. You ready?
Sure.
I do think Matt and I could talk all day.
Yeah.
we have similar conversational styles, I think. So let's start when you moved to Kentucky from Georgia to attend Cumberland College. At that time, you started your training in public health, and you were a football player and a coach, which I love, because Matt knows we're a big football household, and we've talked a lot about football. So can you talk to us about how playing football influenced your professional life, and what connections are there between football and working in public health?
Yes, well, thank you again for the award, and thank you to everybody that's here today. Just a great turnout, and to all the colleagues that are watching via Zoom. I know we've got a watch party going on at the Oldham County Health Department, so hi to those guys, and just thank you for all of the just tremendous support to the colleagues throughout the years. I would be remiss if I didn't say that to start, because anytime you get an award like this, it's truly a recognition of all those around you and the support that they've provided. But I think that did start, that team mindset started by playing football. And I grew up, and as I was sharing with the dean last week, just a fanatic about football from the time that I was early enough to know what football was. And playing football is the ultimate team sport. It's really a microcosm of life. It teaches you how to work with others, how to navigate challenges, and how to truly celebrate others in their success. But when I was playing football, I always prided myself, and I played offensive line, which are by far the smartest guys on the team.
Yes.
But I prided myself in knowing what every other player's responsibility was on every play. I didn't think it was good enough just to know what my responsibility was. But with football being the ultimate team sport, it does take on this air of being collaborative, being supportive, and finding out how that you can actually help influence or benefit those that work along beside you. And if you didn't work well together, you weren't very successful. If you watch football teams that can't score on offense, it's generally because they're making mental mistakes or they're not working cohesively together. And to me, that's what public health has been about. This journey of public health that I've found throughout my years is a truly collaborative process. It's about developing relationships individually and supporting each other in a team type atmosphere. So I think it's been a good overlay, and any type of recognition that comes along in football there are a lot of individual recognitions, but typically speaking, it's about how well a team works together when it comes to the win and loss record.
I love that. I love that analogy. And I have to ask too, what happened to the University of Texas on Saturday night?
Well, I promised you I wouldn't say anything because I did grow up in Georgia and they played the Longhorns the other night. And in fact, we had talked about it on Saturday, and I thought that that they probably would beat Georgia from everything I'd seen over the last couple of years. But I think having that underdog mindset was probably helpful for Georgia. I really do.
So too.
And they really went in and kind of controlled the tempo on all phases of the game.
I agree. Yeah. So see, we do agree on that.
Right.
So after coaching a bit, you met your wife and you moved to Louisville. And not long after that, you started working in public health here in Louisville. My notes say that you worked for the Department of Public Health and Wellness for 27 years, which is amazing. So can you walk us through your early career? So how you got started in public health and the different positions that you held in environmental health and then eventually in operations?
Sure. And this may be long-winded, so stop me if I ramble too far. But football actually brought me to Kentucky. I went to a couple of different schools and ultimately played in the junior college all-star game in Mississippi. And the head coach from Cumberland College came to that game and made a connection. I had already made a commitment to another school in South Georgia and was going there, but he left me a card and just the connection that I made with him. And as I've already said, I'm big on relationships. And that connection and his words resonated with me when I got to Valdosta State. And he had said to me, if it doesn't work out, you've always got a home in Kentucky and, come see us. So when it didn't work out, I called him and he was still that same person, had a consistent mindset about how he dealt with people, and it was always in a positive, reaffirming direction. So coming to Kentucky and actually having had previous institutions, I was thinking about criminal justice and a couple of other majors. And at Cumberland, they had a great public health program. And I sort of fell into a career in public health by taking a few public health courses there at Cumberland. And then I had this wonderful experience with the local health department where I did a field placement, and it was a complete semester where you went to the health department and you worked 40 hours or 37 and a half hours a week doing public health work. And I had this field placement and this internship with the environmental health team that was there. And I found out that it was a great opportunity to get out and help others. And that's one of the things that I think endeared me to public health, is that I've always been a person that pulls for the underdog. And as we know, those people that are less fortunate largely are the ones that we fight for in public health. But having had that experience, and at the time I was coaching football, and I truly thought that I would eventually get my teaching certificate and coach football and teach high school and probably eventually go back towards Georgia, just because they're football crazy in Georgia, if you don't know. And ultimately, as I was pursuing that degree, I felt, if I do not coach, I feel like this could be an amazing career opportunity. And one of the reasons was because to me, one of my mottos is variety is the spice of life. I like doing different things. If I had to go do a job that, I did the same thing day in and day out, that would really get boring to me. And in that environmental internship, I found out that we would go out, we might do a dog bite for the rabies control program where we'd quarantine. We might do a swimming pool inspection or do water quality checks or go out to put in an on-site system. And just that variety really appealed to me. And all the while still thinking that I was going to coach because that was my first love and passion. But as I had this experience, I just kept it tucked in the back of my mind that might be an opportunity as I pursued some type of professional opportunities in the future. And as it worked out, I came to Louisville May the 7th of 1994 for the Derby. I think Gopher Gin won that year because it's pretty memorable. And I met my wife, our future wife, that day. And ultimately, as they say, football brought me to Kentucky, but love brought me to Louisville. So about a year later, I decided to leave the coaching profession and relocate here and try to take on different opportunities. So Luckily, it had worked out where the environmental team that I worked with there in Whitley County at the health department, they had a connection with the supervisor of the food program here because they would come every year and work at the state fair. So them having that relationship, again, just being big on relationships, was important for me to get a foot in the door and to go in and not have an interview, but just back in the day, we were taught if you wanted a job, you needed to go make yourself known. So I called and, set up an opportunity to have a meeting and went in and said, I'm really interested in pursuing this professional opportunity. So as things worked out, very soon thereafter, the health department was awarded a CDC grant for the Childhood Lead Poison Prevention Program. We were actually the National Resource Training Center, and that's how I got the first offer into public health. As I started along this career as an environmental health specialist, again, the variety just really appealed to me. And also being able to help those individuals out that were less fortunate in many regards. We, at the time, we had over 500 children that had elevated blood lead levels or were considered lead poison in the Louisville area. So that was one of the reasons that we received the grant, because we had a massive issue. We still have a major issue in this city with older housing stock, and it tends to cause issues in many regards, with social determinants from housing, whether it be lead or other issues. And there were a lot of opportunities to go in and conduct inspections and identify risk associated. In some houses, as we know, you could identify lead, but there wouldn't be a major risk associated with it because it wasn't chipping or peeling or any of those things. But in most cases, when you went into a house where children had elevated blood lead levels, there was obviously a risk associated with that. And I felt that by helping those individuals out, it just settled well with my heart on trying to serve in a capacity to serve our population that were at risk for different things of that nature. And as I've shared with all of my colleagues throughout my career, especially as I've had the opportunity to grow into leadership roles, that public health is something that you have to be passionate about to do it well. And it is truly a public service, but more specifically, public health is a condition of the heart. And if you do it well, you get a sense of satisfaction, to me, that no other job can provide. And it has been a professional pursuit of passion in the service to others. And I think that just blending those things, of working with a team, having to have partnerships and working in collaborative efforts and serving your community were just things that just melded well with my personality and helped instill in me that this was the right career choice. And I'm not saying that I didn't miss football, but you can still love football from afar and cheer your team on the weekends and go somewhere and make a little more money. Although public health practitioners don't get paid a lot. I did some calculations one time when I was an assistant coach at Cumberland College, and I was making about 78 cents an hour. So as you can tell, I like to eat. So I decided I needed to pursue something that was going to provide food for me in a much more substantial way than coaching was. Coaching was truly a love. It was a labor of love, but I had different responsibilities. And anybody that's ever been a coach as an assistant coach, you understand you've got all of these minor tasks that are critically important, like field maintenance and managing your, different interns to help with many of those challenges, but it takes a lot of time. And then you go to practice and start preparing after you've been in meetings all day and these other things. So jumping and making the transition to public health was just a great fit for me personally. And very quickly after I came in and was working as an environmental health specialist, I shared with the leadership at the health department in Louisville at that time that I had aspirations to grow. I wanted to do everything that I could in service to whatever program that I worked in, but I felt that I could have a greater impact if I could be in positions that might have an impact on policy decisions or the ability to execute action plans to move things forward. So I have a lot of people here that have worked for me in different capacities throughout the years. And I think it's a testament maybe to the way I treated them, but hopefully in the way that I led in different regards, that they're here in support of me today. And I hope that I've been able to fulfill my obligations to the community as a public health practitioner, but also to my colleagues as a leader within the organization. I hope I've been able to fulfill that with fidelity.
Well, listening to you talk about your passion for public health, I wish we could bottle that, right?
Yeah.
And take it everywhere when we're talking to prospective students. And, you know, your journey is certainly unique, but one thing I heard about your journey that is very common in my experience is that you fell into public health. People tend to discover public health. I see a lot of heads nodding, right? You don't usually go to university and say, I want to be public health. Now, sometimes we do, but it's not a large number. I know that was my own experience as well, as a biology major who literally fell into public health. And the other thing that stood out to me about what you said, Matt, was the importance of relationships. And so as I think about the lessons of your career and how our students can learn about it, obviously a big part of relationship building is communication. And so to me, that was a takeaway listening to you talk, is that we really need to underscore for our students the importance of being able to, you know, communicate with one another.
Absolutely. And if you can't, I mean, obviously, anytime we're managing an emergency, as we found with COVID and other things that we've tried to manage, the risk communication is probably more critical than some other actions that we can take. And sometimes we have people that speak for us. In many cases, it might be elected officials or other individuals in positions of authority. And sometimes we need to say, please let us as public health practitioners be the controller of this message. Because once you mess up that initial message and you create this fear, it's like a fire that you can't put out.
Yeah, I hear you. We're going to talk more about that in just a minute. So one of the reasons that we're here today is because you earned a Master of Public Health degree from SPHIS in 2015. And at that point, you had been in public health for almost 20 years. So what motivated you to earn the MPH degree, and what are your big takeaways from that experience?
Well, I had actually, and I guess those of you that are familiar with StrengthsFinder, my number one strength has been a learner. So I've always had this desire to learn and gather more information. And you realize quickly too, as a public health practitioner, that you have to be a collector of information and you have to be able to synthesize that information in order to have a well-informed output or decision on the things that you're going to, provide any type of input on moving forward. So just having a desire to learn was certainly a thing that compelled me towards that. So I had actually started in pursuit of my MPH at EKU previously, but a lot of life issues happened. I lost my father in 2009, right around H1N1. So I put it on hold. And I was still thinking and actually in conversation with UofL SPHIS about opportunities to move forward. And then two things happened. If you want to talk about exceptional leadership, we had a director named Dr. Adewale Troutman, who was just the master motivator. I mean, he could make you want to run through a wall to do things, for benefit of public health. So he was encouraging me along that line. And then secondarily, we had another leader that came in around 2010 or so, 2011, Dr. LaQuandra Nesbitt, who was just a phenomenal motivator and encourager. And she said, basically, I want you on my leadership team, but you need to get your master's of public health. So her motivation was, I need you to do this because I want you to be the most exceptional leader that you can and understand public health at a deeper level. So there was encouragement by others, but also a self-motivation to pursue that.
Awesome. I did have the pleasure of meeting him at one point, and my brief encounter with him was similar to what you just described. So Thank you for sharing that. So you retired from Louisville Metro Public Health and Wellness, but then you rejoined the workforce during COVID when you became the health director in Oldham County. Can you tell us how that came about, and what was it like to be a health director during that critical time?
Yes, I can. And thank you for the question. I actually had set forth a plan. I try to have a plan and execute that plan in everything I do in my life. So I had gotten some great counsel early on when I started working in public health from some individuals that they said, hey, we have this great opportunity. We don't get paid a lot of money, But the first thing that you need to do is pay yourself. So we have the opportunity through deferred compensation where we can put pre-tax dollars back in our check and let that, earn interest over time. And I was told at that time, you never know what benefit that's going to afford you down the road. So as it worked out, the legislature in the state of Kentucky passed law that said if you're in the retirement system, when you all may or may not be familiar with the challenges that we've had in the retirement system, but over time, they've put forth different opportunities to try to mitigate the challenges associated with the retirement system. And in some cases, around 2008, there was a mass retirement where people left so that they could lessen the number of people on the rolls and minimize some of the financial challenges. Along that same time, they actually offered opportunities for you to purchase time if you had a certain number of years in the retirement system. And I saw it as a great opportunity financially to be able to do that. So I purchased some time. So I actually worked about 25 years and had a 5 years time purchased in the system, but I always had a plan that I was going to retire on a certain date. I had no understanding that we might be in the pandemic of our lives when I set forth that plan, but I had set that plan in action and decided to go ahead and move forward with that plan. And it was bittersweet. I mean, because I'd always had this goal of retiring from the department and maybe pursuing other opportunities. I live on a farm and, we have great work opportunities on the farm. It's a very challenging environment. And it's for people that know anything about farms, you don't really make money on a farm. It's a labor of love. You had to go to work to make money so that you can operate the farm. So it wasn't a business opportunity, but having left, and again, going back to, my upbringing in team sports, I felt like as I was sitting on the sideline watching my public health colleagues, that they were truly just in the fight of their life. Mm-hmm. And I had the good fortune to be able to retire. And it just so happened that the director in Oldham County had retired about the same time. And someone contacted me and asked if I might be interested in returning as the director for the health department. So I said, after about 2, 3, 4 minutes thinking about it, yes, I think that's just a tremendous opportunity because I felt like my colleagues were out there and I had more to give back to this team. And hopefully I've done a good job of leading the Oldham County Health Department and trying to structure an environment where we serve in the best interest of the community, but we also set a standard of excellence for ourselves and move forward. So that whole understanding of the team dynamics and feeling like in public health, you're not a lone contributor or sole contributor, that you do this as a team and that my team in public health may need some more assistance, and that I felt like I had skills and other assets to provide to that team. I decided to jump back in. And I will say, to your point, it was the most challenging of times during COVID. I received some of the most vitriolic communications that you could ever imagine. And I mean, there were times where you were fearful for your life, quite frankly, that you thought some people may go to that level of extreme and take some drastic action. I'm very thankful, though, that I have always tried to maintain the principled approach and be practical and pragmatic in my delivery of whatever it is related to processes and guidance and so forth, and try to stay very centric in my approach. And what I found in COVID was that oftentimes there were as many people saying you're not doing enough as there were saying you're doing too much. So in many cases, you were trying to thread that needle, and you kind of felt like if you could stay in that centrist approach, that you were going to have the best outcome for the population.
That sounds tricky.
It's very tricky.
We're talking about COVID.
Right. Yes. Yeah. It's very tricky because, as we've talked before, and I've shared this with individuals, that public health is not easy. It's a multifaceted, dynamic approach. And, and oftentimes the answer to the question is it depends. But as we know, public health, as I say, sits at the intersection of science and evidence and political will. And our big challenge as public health practitioners is making sure we don't let that science and evidence, we let the science and evidence overrun political will, but understanding that there has to be a balance associated with that as well, and not let the political will overtake the science and evidence to the best of our ability.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so well said. And actually, that's my next question.
Okay.
COVID really changed public health forever, I think, in so many ways, right? I mean, even if you just think about the recommendations that CDC gave about masking and how that changed over time. And we as public health professionals, we understand that, we understand how the science changes, or you have to give a message based on supplies, or, there's a variety of factors that go into that. But, this, in my view, this is disheartening. And yet we have an opportunity in a School of Public Health and Information Sciences to talk with a lot of different constituencies, especially students, and try to help equip them to be successful in this space. So you've already talked a little bit about this, but can you talk a little bit more about your strategies for navigating the political landscape when the political will is at odds with the science? And then you give yours, and then I'll just share a little bit of my own experience recently related to COVID vaccination.
Sure.
That easy subject.
Yeah. And it is, quite frankly, a challenging dance. And what I have discovered throughout my career, and others may disagree, is that it is hard to be successful as a public health practitioner if you are a single issue advocate and you live and die by that single issue, because public health is so broad and so multifaceted. And you have to understand that as we go up against this political landscape, in some cases, you may not get the outcome or the win that you want. So I caution people about being single issue advocates and living and dying with it. But what I do say is that we most definitely have to be policy advocates, and we have to be able to gather the data and the research and information and have the most well-informed response when we go talk to those individuals that have the authority and the power to put legislative changes into place. And I've had the good fortune of working alongside colleague Scott Lockard and Kate. I know we're going to maybe talk about it later, for the legislative and advocacy work that we do there. And what we found, again, and he uses the expression that, life and everything that we do is around relationships, and building relationships is a full contact sport, that you have to be there in both good and bad times. And you've got to make that connection, and you have to ensure that the individuals that have the authority to make those decisions know that they can trust you, that you're consistent in your approach, you're trying to do what's in the best interest of population, and you're trying to help balance your approach against the economic impact or other political impacts that may exist out there in the landscape that we're discussing, whatever issue. And oftentimes you have to understand that you may not get the outcome that you want today. You may not have the win, if you will, but you're preparing and building that relationship so that they know that they can trust you. And oftentimes they come back to you as the resource. You don't have to go to them. So it's about developing that relationship and making sure that you build the trust so that they know that, you're not just there for a single issue, but if they have a public health concern, they can call you as the resource.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. And, I also think that in public health, we can do a lot better of a job of communicating, even in the face of uncertainty, so as it relates to COVID vaccination, if there's a vacuum of information, people are going to fill that. So getting out there, but I think building trusted relationships too is so important.
Yeah, I agree. It is the key. It's the cornerstone to everything that you're going to do. And I have found, both in dealing, with issues of public health as contrasted against, political will, and in leadership, the one thing that you can never do is answer a question if you don't know the answer. It's much better to say, I do not know the answer to that question, but I will commit to you that I will go and research and get the data, and I will come back with a well-informed decision.
I think that's important too. Thank you for that. So you have had numerous different service positions over the years, but one notable position is with the Kentucky Health Department Association, or CADA, as we call it. and you're currently co-chair of the Legislative and Advocacy Committee. So can you tell us more about CADA and how it serves public health in Kentucky?
I can, and thank you very much for this opportunity, because CADA is an association which represents all 61 local health departments, primarily attended by the directors of those health departments, but also there are other staff that fill in as proxies or participate in different capacities. And I can say without a doubt, this organization and through some strategic decisions that we've made over the last several years, actually moving into a contract with a consulting group, Babbage co-founder, we have had the greatest influence on public health in the last 5 to 6 years than ever in my career in public health. CADA is truly a respected entity. And again, we're talking about building those relationships. If there are public health issues that arise that the legislature has questions about, CADA is generally their first point of contact.
That's great. So before we open it up for questions, this is my last question. What advice do you have for our students who are preparing to graduate? Any tips for success?
Well, again, it goes back to building relationships. Be prepared to understand that you have to build relationships, and no matter how smart or how resourceful you are as an individual, you cannot be an effective public health practitioner unless you have collaborative relationships to support you in your endeavors throughout your career. And I would also say, make sure that you have this condition of the heart of public service, that if you do not have a passion for the work that you do and understand that you do your work for population health outcomes, not for personal gain, it will be hard for you to be successful. Anytime there are challenges or losses along the way, if you're doing it for internal purposes, sometimes it's easier to quit. But if you're doing it for the population, it's going to compel you to fight on.
Awesome. Well, before we take questions, please join me once again in congratulating Matt and thanking him for sharing his journey. And on behalf of the University of Louisville School of Public Health and Information Sciences, we want to present you with this award in recognition of your accomplishments and service to public health and to the University of Louisville.
Thank you so very much. And I will say this for the university, the Alumni Association, this entire experience has been just top notch from start to finish. So the recognition received from the university has been phenomenal, but the process and the people have been even greater. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we have some time for questions, and Melissa has the mic for those of you that are here, and I think Paige is monitoring the chat for those of you who are joining us online. So what questions do you have?
Okay, I'll go to Tammy and then.
So, Matt, in 27 years, you saw a lot of things transpire within the health department. And when you were an environmental health specialist, can you tell us one of the most interesting situations that you were involved in? Or I've heard lots of your stories, which are great, and I think they need to be shared. But you had a lot of challenges, a lot of different situations that you had to handle. What would be one of the most challenging, besides, of course, COVID, that you would like to describe?
Thank you for that question. And there's certainly a grab bag of things that you've experienced. Anytime you have a career that's, spanned over several decades, there are a lot of things. But we were talking earlier, and I think one of the major challenges, and it goes back to some of the things we were discussing about having, advocacy around a single issue. One of the greatest things that we've done in public health is moved forward with policy around tobacco, cigarettes, and smoking. So you all may recall in 2005, we passed the first ordinance locally that prohibited smoking in indoor public facilities. So it was a major challenge, not externally initially, but more internally. And some of my team can share this story with you. But environmental health was going to be the division that was responsible for enforcing this ordinance that passed. And, just through discussions and hearing feedback, I got the sense that about half of the staff in the environmental division, made up of about 50 individuals, wasn't necessarily in agreement with the smoke-free law, because they believe that like owners' rights should have an effect that was greater than us as a regulatory agency going in and telling them, or Metro Council or whomever. So I knew that we had to address that issue head on. And we decided that at the time, the leadership, myself and the other leaders in the division, that we needed to have a meeting just to discuss where we were, because again, it goes back to, you can't be truly an issue advocate and be a good public health practitioner, because I knew the responsibility for enforcement was going to lie with us and rest on our shoulders, and how well we enforced it was going to be truly impactful on how well people complied and how much of an impact that we would have on population health and health outcomes associated with smoking. So we decided to have an off-site meeting, and going into the room, I said, we're going to divide up into two groups. The individuals that are in support of the smoke-free ordinance and think that we should enforce it, go to this side of the room. The individuals that are opposed go to this side of the room. So we got to walk in, sort of like we find ourselves this day and age in this politically divided arena. We walked in, and I started the meeting by saying, I understand that there are people here who are supportive and people who are opposed for whatever reason. It may be because you didn't want to go in and take on the fight of enforcing this rule, which had been controversial, quite frankly, leading up to that. So we had, 6-hour, 8-hour meeting that day, just discussing all of the challenges associated with enforcement. And we said, we're going to let everyone air their grievances and or air their support for this. And we had a very healthy and robust conversation where people felt the opportunity to be heard. And I said, and as we, started concluding the day, I said, now here's the challenge. When we walk out of those doors, we are all going to be on the same page, and we're going to enforce this law to the best of our ability. So if there are other concerns that you have with it, now is your time to speak up and share. But the message from the department is that we're in support of this ordinance, and we are going to enforce it at our best. And I think by allowing everyone to be heard in that process, I'm certainly not naive enough to think that we resolved everything, but by going through that process, people had the opportunity to be heard. And I can say that we went out and enforced it. Now, I have a follow-up story for enforcement that's pretty funny that we were talking about earlier, but we enforced it with fidelity. And quite frankly, it is one of the laws, similar to seatbelt laws, that become self-enforcing over time. But if you allow there to be lapses at the start, then you would not get great compliance. And I knew that going in. And I will say kudos to my team in the environmental division, because they did a phenomenal job out in bars at 3 a.m. and, midnight, and trying to enforce this was certainly not fun. But one of the most compelling investigations that we had was there was a lot of animosity, believe it or not, from bingo halls. And, some of the meanest people that you've ever seen are 80 and 85-year-old women playing bingo and wanting to smoke. So we actually went down, and I'm not going to name any facility, but we down around the south end of Louisville, we had to get the police to go with us. And the reason being, because as Joe Health Officer, we didn't have the opportunity to get anybody's identification. If we asked what because we saw someone smoking, because we decided we'd already written citations to the hall owners themselves, the property owners. But the only way we were going to be able to enforce it is have an individual enforcement provision. And they told us that. They said, you're going to have to come in here and enforce on these old ladies because we can't control them. And I shouldn't say old ladies. I should say elderly individuals, because there were some men that were just about as mean. So we went there, and some of the staff are in the room, and we went with the police. And it's funny now. It was a real challenge at the time, because people felt like that we were infringing upon their civil liberties to be able to go into that facility and smoke. And when we went in, the first couple of individuals that we had to ask for their ID, they were like, "You're not getting my ID." And then the police officer would step up to assist us. Again, we have a great partnership with law enforcement, and they were able to assist us in this capacity. So we just wrote a few citations for that night. And ultimately, as you all probably remember, there were many, many lawsuits that followed that. And I think ultimately we got to either the third or fourth iteration of the law before it truly took effect and took hold, because people were filing lawsuits based on constitutionality, because unfortunately they tried to grant too many exception categories at first, trying to accommodate all of these different groups. And we found out if you don't have a comprehensive law in relation to this, then everybody can claim to be an exception category. So going out, and some of the staff can tell you, writing a couple of tickets to some of those elderly individuals that wanted to smoke was not fun. It's funny now, but we truly were able to get compliance with the law following that. And it was just based on perseverance and saying, we respect you as an individual, but we have a job to do and a law to enforce as it relates to smoking prohibition in public places. And I will say this, I think the work that public health has done around smoking and smoking cessation and regulatory work around that has been, one of the hallmarks of the benefit of doing this type of work. And it's truly changed as we've seen, traditional smoking rates continue to decline. Unfortunately, now we're seeing almost an inverse relationship with vaping and other things. So there's still a lot of work to do around that, but we need to do a good job to ensure that we're educating and collecting that data and all of the other items that we need to do to inform that issue as well. So, and there are a whole host of other things as far as, I would tell this too while we're thinking. I went into a restaurant, would not name any names, when I was actually an inspector in the food program. And there was the way that you're supposed to defrost food. There's a couple different ways you can do it in the cooking process, under running water, or, from microwave to the cooking process. And I walked in and they had a hot water sanitizing dish machine. Well, the glass tray holder on this dish machine, it was square, about yay by yay. Well, it will hold 16 chickens perfectly, I can tell you, because I opened that and there were 16 raw chickens on the glass holder that they were thawing out. That was their thaw process. So those types of things you saw often. We have pictures of where we found, animals that weren't animals that were supposed to be in walk-in freezers and things like that we had to quarantine and seize in many cases. But they're just a wealth of funny things that have happened like that over time, but it's just truly been a great experience.
Hello, Matt, and congratulations. You very much deserve where you are, and what you do is very inspiring for all of us. So my question is, and I do observe and truly respect what you have been telling us, consistency is important. Collaborative work is important. Comprehensive approaches are very valuable. Networking. While these are all very important in the public health arena, the type of issues we have, and we have to address so many to help population. If you are given with a magic wand, where would you start? You can use it only once. No. Where would you start? And how would you make sure it is very useful to get to that comprehensive approach, which will take you to the finish line?
That's a tough question to answer, quite frankly. But I mean, most things that we found that you gain traction on start with children, quite frankly. And obviously we do a very thorough job trying to address maternal child health issues, but I'm not so sure that children are getting exposed to public health related materials in whether it be school or other settings. And if we had an opportunity to infuse more public health curriculum into the school curriculum, I think it might be helpful to show how by design we're apolitical and we don't want to bleed over into those political partisan issues, but in some cases that's just where we find ourselves. But trying to address the social determinants of health and how some people start to race a lot further back than others. I mean, some of these individuals I heard recently somebody say, yeah, they were born on third base and think they hit a triple. And oftentimes it's just because that they had the luck of the draw. And we need to try to inform individuals to the best of our ability that it's not just about behavior modification or your choices. There are a whole host of other things that influence public health outcomes. So it's, to set forth a plan about how to attack that precisely would be challenging to do here today. But I think we need to start with the education and understanding that all of these things that affect us are not just necessarily individual related concerns, that there are a whole host of other things that impact health outcomes. And if we don't all care about the population and what happens to our fellow human beings, then we're really, in my opinion, missing the boat, quite frankly.
All right. We got 2 questions here. So first one came from a doctoral student. They're wondering, what qualities or skills are you expecting to see in resumes and during interviews?
That's a great question. I mean, obviously you want to see that they have the appropriate credential and educational background. But the things that I like to see, because I know in public health, you have to do things that aren't necessarily in your job description. I like to see where people have gone out and done things like volunteer work, or they've, worked in other capacities that weren't necessarily just to track them to a career in public health. And if there's, philanthropic opportunities or other organizations that they could serve that benefit people and benefit population issues, that would be something that would be motivating for me. Obviously, you want to see people that have really endeavored to have a high GPA, but the GPA is not the end all be all. I mean, you want students to do their very best and be diligent in getting the highest GPA, but sometimes if there's opportunities to show that they've gone out and worked on developing relationships and other capacities and serving others, it could be helpful.
We had 2 comments and 1 final question. So it's from Randy. I may say your last name wrong. Gooch.
Randy Gooch.
He had a comment. He said, I've worked with many public health colleagues as well as directors, and he wants to say Matt is one of the most respected, trusted, knowledgeable, well-spoken, effective leaders who works for the entire public health system with great dedication and diligence. Congratulations on a well-deserved award and tremendous career.
Thank you. That's very kind. I as I've told many people, I don't feel deserving of this award, but it's a true testament to the people that I've worked with and worked for. I've always, in leadership opportunities, I've never set up this hierarchical mindset where you work for me and service to me. I feel like we're all there working together, but that's just a tremendous comment from Randy. Thank you.
And then your colleagues at Oldham County said they're cheering you on from LaGrange. Their question is, what advice do you have for current and future public health professionals?
Be flexible and to be prepared that you're not always going to win. As we talk about, this public health being at the intersection of science and evidence and political will, there are going to be times where you're not going to get the outcome that you want. So you need to be able to go back and regroup, get the details, whether it be data or research or other information, to come back and inform that conversation, but also make sure that you're building relationships prior to those conversations needing to happen. It's sort of like the mantra that we say when we have, preparedness discussions, is that you don't need to be building your relationship over the hood of the fire truck if you're responding to an emergency. You should have built those relationships prior to getting there. So, and that holds true in anything in life. If you want to find the people that make things happen, it's those people that have what we used to refer to as a Rolodex. Now it's your contact list in your phone that can pick up the phone and call whoever it is that can get that issue addressed in a forthright manner.
I'm glad you said that advice was translational to other things. I was going to say it's the same thing for football teams.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It certainly is.
Anyone else here?
Thank you, Matt. I have a question for you. Thinking about 15 or 20 years from now, what do you think will be an issue that we think about now, that we now think about in terms of tobacco cessation or safety laws or those kinds of things? What do you think we'll have accomplished and look back in hindsight?
Yeah, that's another very challenging question. I think one of the things that we've done in public health is that we've really tried to move our focus towards a pursuit of excellence. And I think started in the early 2000s, this pursuit of accreditation for local health departments. You're seeing more and more health departments get accredited. And what it does is it infuses this process-oriented approach of continuous quality improvement, where we're not just doing things that previously we had like categorical requirements. We would get funding that was categorical funding, and you'd have to go do these three things, and you couldn't go outside of those three things if you got that funding. Now we're getting public health transformation funding, and that's one thing that I didn't say. Through CATA, we were able to lobby the legislature and have public health transformation passed in the state of Kentucky, for which we are a leader in the nation. There are states from all around the country calling CATA representatives and other legislators that are asking how we were able to pull this off, because what we were able to do is to go say, these are foundational elements that every individual that resides in the Commonwealth of Kentucky should expect from their local health department. And we need to make sure that we set aside funding to be able to support that for the rest of their lives, hopefully. And unfortunately, that is a challenge that we have to face every 2 years with the biennium budget. We have to make sure that we go and advocate for that funding to continue to support that. But just to have had that conversation in this state that has so many public health needs with our legislature and have them be supportive of us in that endeavor was just phenomenal. And I think as we look back in 20 years, hopefully we see every local health department in the state of Kentucky, and I think there's approximately 3,000 across the country, either having been accredited or in pursuit of accreditation, because it sets that standard of excellence by which you're in pursuit of, to make sure that you're doing the best that you can to impact population health outcomes in a positive way.
I love that. So I'm gonna take the last question, because I think we have to wrap here. I'm gonna kind of tweak Angela's question a little bit, because I thought you were gonna ask the same one I did. But when you talked about the successes that we've had around smoking in this country and reduction in prevalence of smoking, it made me think about how young people these days just don't know what it's like to have smoking, ambient smoking, in your daily life, and you couldn't control it. So I was trying to think about that from the flip side. What are some of the challenges that young people are experiencing now that are different than when we were young? And it makes me think about social media and an increase in mental health challenges. So what are some of the challenges that you think about that are facing younger people these days that we need to tackle?
Yeah, you hit it head on. It's technology. Our brains are not designed to be turned on all the time. You need some downtime. And that's one thing as a public health practitioner, I want to say, make sure that you do stuff to protect yourself, and that, as they say nowadays, self-care is sexy. You need to find a way to disconnect and take care of yourself, but also be prepared that when you come back that you're ready to go full force. But quite candidly, we've seen an increase in all of these indices related to mental health. And, there's that argument about correlation and causation. But if you go back to the time of the advent of all of these technological advances that we've made, you've just seen a steady incline of these mental health indicators. So how we effectively address that is, we used to say the $64,000 question. It's more than $1 million question. It's probably billions of dollars question now. And I'm not sure how we do it, but if we don't start targeting this issue, I mean, you're seeing professionals now start talking about how it is equivalent to an addiction.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, it's not just young people, it's all of us. The first thing that I do every day when I wake up is look at my phone to see who's reached out or what type of message that I need to respond to. And if we can't find effective ways to address that, I'm not sure that we're going to make a substantial impact with our children. But we've got to find mechanisms and avenues where we can get them disconnected from that. And that's one of the reasons, quite frankly, that when I was nominated or appointed this year by the governor to Fish and Wildlife Commission. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about that, because I think maintaining that heritage and getting children and young adults connected to nature is vital to our long-term health.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, we're going to turn it back over to Melissa.
Well, I just want to thank you all for such a thought-provoking conversation today. What amazing questions, and special thanks, of course, to you, Dean Cardarelli, and to you, Matt, for being here with us and sharing all these ideas. So big round of applause for all of us.
Yeah, and I do want to say thank you to all of you that are here and those that are watching on Zoom. I know you all are busy professionals and you have other things that you could do with your day and time, and I really appreciate you being here with us. So thank you.
And I'll add thanks to the folks who helped make today possible, our technology team, to our friends at the School of Nursing who made this room available, and to all of you guys for just showing up. And so we will encourage you to grab a plate on the way out. I think we made a dent in the food, but there'll be more if you want to do that. And anyone who's an alum, we would love to get a group picture. So we will gather sort of up in the front and figure out how to make that happen.